We're back. We're back. We're so back.
Yes.
And this is session number 59. It's almost hard to believe.
59?
And we have something unique here. Looks like bananas. Are you hungry?
Well, if we get hungry, we know we've got some sustenance here. This is thanks to Stephanie again. She's furnished flowers the last few times for us, and she's very supportive of our work.
Maybe we can have Stephanie come back and discuss some things with us in another session. That would be nice.
Yes. We've been on quite a journey recently on this letter number 92. We took a detour to bring in quite a bit of information about who HPB is, because that's who they were discussing in this letter, and why she did have certain problems, and yet why she is a unique individual in their realm. The only one they could find that could do what she could do. So before we get into that, I want to discuss, because this is going to be a topic for our discussion today, and I want to set the scene, two ideas, two doctrines, I guess you could say, that the Mahatmas practice themselves. One of them is called abstraction. And abstraction is similar to extraction, but it's a little bit different. Extraction means you remove something from something. Abstraction is a little more of taking the essential qualities of something, but without diminishing the original object. It's probably best to give some examples of that. Near the end of a person's life, remember Eckhart Tolle talked about the lady who was dying and how he was helping her to release, let go of things that don't matter.
Lighten her load.
That's exactly what abstraction is. It is figuring out what is the essential and leaving everything else. And you've got this one thing that you thought is indivisible, and you kind of separate the more essential qualities, which are the more spiritual qualities, from that which is no longer going to be useful to you. It still is somewhat, but the vast majority of what you thought was so important in life, at the moment of death, all of a sudden, that means nothing whatsoever. Nothing. The more often we think about that, the better off we are now and will be when the moment of death comes. Keep that always in mind. What is it that you are going to really care about at the moment of death? And if you have a lot of unresolved issues, that's probably going to overwhelm you. So get them resolved now. Why are you waiting? So that's just in general what abstraction is. Another quality is divine indifference, and that goes right along with the abstraction quality. It is, you could say, the ability to not care, to not give a damn, but it's not that.
It's not that,
all.
because the word care, we forget what that actually means. We do care, but we don't stress. We don't obsess and worry. That's the difference. Semantics.
And that's what we saw in our last session when the Mahatma was talking about why they allow their chelas and potential chelas to get into scrapes, to get into problems that are self-created, because that's a learning experience for them. And they're not going to rush in and save them from it. Why would they? That's valuable experience. So, no. That doesn't mean they don't care. It's completely the opposite. They care enough to let those people, those chelas, experience what they've created. And that's divine indifference. That's why, with all the turmoil that we see going on in the outer world, with Hume and Sinnett and HPB and Alcott and all of the others, the masters can still laugh. They watch all of that from way up here, and many, many times they shake their heads and laugh. Those silly mortals. In Greek and Roman times, they talked about the gods watching the mortals, and that's exactly what it is.
There are two great stories that Eckhart Tolle tells about this exact thing, and I think they're both in A New Earth. One might be in The Power of Now, but one is called Not Minding What Happens, and the other is That So? Not minding what happens and Is That So? They both relate to events that happen, and one person might get up in arms about each one, and another person who is more evolved would not get up in arms and realize that everything happens for a reason, and there is no right or wrong, but we decide. We think Shakespeare, but thinking makes it so. We decide if something is bad or good, if something is positive or negative. And who knows, the thing that you might have thought was the worst thing might have turned out to be the best thing.
And that's what I've found in life. I've been through some excruciating circumstances and events and periods of time in my life. I wondered at some points, how am I going to get through this? I always said, what is the worst thing that can happen? And then, of course, you can deal with that. And now I look back and realize I learned more during those times than at any other point. That was absolutely crucial experience that I needed to get to wherever I happen to be right now. So I absolutely treasure every single obstacle that presents itself in my path now. I didn't at the time, but I sure do now. Now, let's continue here. We learned a lot of different things in the last two sessions. We were talking about some enemies that had developed and how that happened. The Mahatmas actually were involved in that because they told HPB to reveal the nefarious actions of two of them, and that turned them into inveterate enemies, both of her and Theosophy and also the Mahatmas behind the scenes. But it was HPB who got all of the slings and arrows, and she took them valiantly. But at the same time, HPB had a quality about her that saved the Mahatmas at times 2/3 of the amount of energy that it would have required that they expend in order to accomplish something. And it wasn't just in phenomena. It was in the communications between the Mahatmas and the Englishmen, for example. It was in many other things. The Mahatmas are going through trials of their own, as we have said before. They are still learning, and we'll learn today that their ultimate goal is what? To become a Dhyan Chohan. Not in any particular lifetime, but in the far distant future for them. Our goal should be to become a Mahatma. Not right now, but in the foreseeable future when we're talking about lifetimes. So everybody has a goal. Everybody has obstacles. Everybody has problems that they have to solve. They're in training. We're in training. We're all in training. It never ends. If you think it's going to end, you're mistaken. One of the things that, despite her great positive points, and she had a lot of positive points, we'll point those out in just a moment, but 2 or 3 things that made her not quite the perfect candidate for adeptship was that she was overly sentimental. As we've said, the Mahatmas themselves are still somewhat sentimental. They say openly, or KH did at least, I still have more affections for certain people than I do for others. I still have great affection for the country I was born in and hope to see it achieve once again the spiritual grandeur it had at one point. They are sentimental. She's overly sentimental, and it is a detraction. Another problem that she had was anger, explosive anger. She would absolutely explode, and the Mahatmas expressed it that way many times. And even they knew to just wait until she came back to equilibrium. I've worked with Italians before, and it was very interesting. They would sometimes get into an argument with each other in Italian, which I couldn't understand, And they would start shouting, and it would increase in volume until they were so angry. One of them would get up and say, "I'm leaving," and the other would pull him down and say, "No, I'm leaving." We thought these guys were going to start punching each other. And 5 minutes later, they're laughing and joking and acting as if that never, ever happened. That's what HPB could do. And how did she do it? She had no hatred towards anyone, not one single person in the world, as far as I can tell. For example, Serapis said that she hated the man that she was married to. But I don't think that was entirely true. She might have had some irritation towards him, but there's no indication that she ever hated anyone. And the other thing was that she never held a grudge, ever, ever. And that was something that worked tremendously in her favor and that we all need to learn. Love every person in the world, never hold a grudge. If we can learn those two things, we're well on our way to adeptship. Couple of other things. We didn't really finish some of our discussion because there were so many different elements to it. Let's talk about the portrait of the Yogi Tiravala, and we'll display that on the screen again so it'll refresh your memories. We're going to delve a little bit into the circumstances of that. I'm going to have Paul read just a short section here that was written by Colonel Alcott. He was commenting on Mr. Sinnett's description of this portrait that HPB had produced phenomenally, and he'll give a little bit of the background on it. Let me set the scene here. They are at New York. It's in the early days of their relationship. I don't remember if it was before or after the TS was inaugurated, but right around that time, they were friends with W.Q. Judge. They were all sitting at the table in the same house.
At the close of the dinner, we had drifted into talk about precipitations, and W.Q. Judge asked HPB if she would make somebody's portrait for us. As we were moving toward the writing room, she asked him whose portrait he wished made, and he chose that of this particular yogi, whom we knew by name as one held in great respect by the masters. Really? The masters respected this guy?
Apparently, and this is the only reference I've ever seen to this yogi.
Do you think he was one of the masters?
Maybe not, but he was highly developed. He was definitely a yogi and someone that they revered. Not all of them are in the same realm, but they're all connected.
She crossed to my table, took a sheet of my club paper, tore it in halves, and laid one half down on her own blotting paper. She then scraped perhaps a grain of the plumbago of a Faber.
Faber pencils are still made today in Germany. They are very, very good pencils. And in 1875 or whatever this was, they were already making very well-recognized products.
Wow.
Everybody had a penknife. Everybody did. Because in the old days, you had to cut a quill to make a pen. And in your office or drawing room, you always had a penknife. So she used a penknife to scrape a few grains, which is a tiny, tiny bit of the lead, we call it lead, but it's graphite, off of this pencil onto the paper.
She then scraped perhaps a grain of the plumbago of a Faber lead pencil on it, and then rubbed the surface for a minute or so with a circular motion of the palm of her right hand, after which she handed us the result. On the paper had come the desired portrait, and, setting wholly aside the question of its phenomenal character, it is an artistic production of power and genius. LeClear, the noted American portrait painter, declared it unique, distinctly and individual in the technical sense, one that no living artist within his knowledge could have produced. Wow. Madame Blavatsky explained some aspects of the mechanics of the precipitation. Colonel Alcott writes, in connection with her New York precipitations of the yogis and M.A. Oxen's portraits, the writing of the latter, and other phenomena, She explained that inasmuch as the images of all objects and incidents are stored in the astral light, it did not require that she should have seen the person or known the writing, the image of which she wished to precipitate. She had only to be put on the track and could find and see them for herself and then objectivate them.
That's kind of a short description of how she was able to produce artistic phenomena like that. And in the letter that we read, I believe 2 sessions ago, K.H. was talking about this, and he mentioned that she had abilities that none of their Asian Chelas did for perspective and for artistic talent. And she did have some excellent artistic talent.
This is incredibly telling. So the images are stored in the astral light. And we've talked about our chart of the human constitution and the planes of our solar system many times. So the astral plane is the plane of existence where emotions and dreams exist. I wonder why it wouldn't be in the mental realm versus astral.
I don't know, and they may have been speaking more in general terms, more like ethereal realms.
Okay. But which could relate to any of the inner realms, really. Did not require that she knew the image herself. She just had to be set on the right track, meaning she could tune into it somehow.
And I'm assuming, it's almost certain, that this was after the great transformation we talked about in our last session, where her and Morya's consciousness were so tightly merged together that it was hard for her to separate what was his and what was hers.
That brings me to my question, though, that maybe some people are curious about. This exact technique that she did, she took a sheet of Alcott's club paper, whatever that is.
Any distinguished gentleman in those days had a club that they belonged to.
Okay.
And it was a place for them to get away from their wives and children and go smoke cigars and have a brandy with their fellow high society guys. That's what their club was.
So there's a very specific sequence of actions to do to produce this. So she took a sheet of his paper, tore it in halves, laid one half on her own blotting paper.
Blotting paper is a coarse paper that when you write in pen and ink, you set it on top to absorb excess ink.
Oh, right. Okay. So there's that. Took one of his, ripped it in half, put it on hers, then scraped a grain of graphite or lead from a pencil on, I guess, the top of both?
Yes, just on the paper.
But 2 sheets stacked for some reason. And it took a minute with her right hand and just like physically or above it?
I don't know.
This says rub the surface, so it's probably on her hand. And then after which the portrait was there.
Yeah.
So this is what I was going to ask. I can't imagine that during her training, she was taught this. Okay, HPB, if you're going to produce a portrait for someone ever in your life, this is how you do it. You know what I mean? I'm sure that didn't happen. So she either intuited, just knew how to produce this, or used her own knowledge of esoteric things. Okay, the graphite is a medium that could be used for this. I'm going to create this spiraling action. So maybe, and then here it is. Either that or since she's connected with Morya.
And that's absolutely possible. But that's how they train, is once they have enough of this blending of consciousness, they can make that occur to a high degree and then do something, and then it's as if the Chela has done it themselves.
So she learned through doing it right now. Now she knows for the future, but not that she would specifically need that per se, that exact technique, even though it's cool. Interesting.
But here's the thing. None of this can happen unless the Chela is absolutely pure in intention, in their thoughts, in their emotions. So even though she had momentary eruptions of anger, that didn't prevent this.
We should mention, though, that it can be forced. Bad people can learn the stuff through a forced method, through an unnatural means. it could happen for them, but it's not advisable. And there's karma, and it's for the wrong reasons. There's black magicians who can do this stuff too.
To some extent.
To some extent.
Now, as we've said before, evil will never overtake everything in the end. It cannot happen.
It's not the way the universe works.
It's not even possible. And it's because we see how the Mahatmas operate. They have this system that has been honed for trillions, quadrillions, who knows how many years. And it has worked in every single solar system, every single galaxy. It works. On the other hand, you have evil actors in every single galaxy, in every single solar system, every single planetary system. You have to have evil actors too. How do they operate? We can look at our political system today around the world and see how that operates. They get a certain amount of power, a huge amount of power. But then what happens?
It collapses.
It collapses.
It never lasts forever. If we're too focused on the short term, it seems like the bad guys can do so much. It's like, wow, why? But no, we have to remember to zoom out to the larger time scales, or else it doesn't make sense. If you focus just on a decade or even a lifetime, but when you zoom out to like the cycles of rises and falls of civilizations and of planets, then you see that evil does not win. It can't, like Terry said.
So if you were looking around you today and going, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Just keep in mind that behind the scenes, the Mahatmas are shaking their heads and laughing.
They're saying, is that so?
Is that so?
Is that so? And then you just bide your time. Do what you need to stay safe, of course. You need to obviously eat food today and have shelter today, right now, in real time. You have to take care of yourself in real time. You can't deny that hardships are going on. But is that so? Okay, and then we keep going. We keep going.
Yes.
We keep going.
So hopefully you're beginning to see that we're teaching you here through the Mahatmas. They are teaching. We didn't make this stuff up.
I wish we did.
It's not
but
the P&T show here. No, this is the Mahatma show here, and we're just the delivery people.
Yeah. That's funny.
But they're teaching us how life works. This is incredible. This is why the Mahatma Letters have so much unmined gems and treasures.
Unmined gems. Wow, that's a new one. You made that one up, didn't you? Unmined gems? I like that.
And we are hopefully uncovering some of these and offering them to you.
We're mining them.
If you accept them and put them into practice, then you, like the Mahatmas, will become among the wealthiest people in the world. Far, far wealthier than any billionaire or trillionaire that could ever exist, because those people are going to be among the evil actors. I guarantee it. You, if you put these into practice, will be far wealthier than any of them. I want to point out, too, that another one of HPB's good features was that she had almost zero ego. Almost none. Everything that I've seen in investigating her life shows that she doesn't do anything because she thinks it's going to bring her fame or fortune or anything. And that's one of the things that her detractors could never, ever pin on her.
No, that's a very good point. We haven't really mentioned that.
What would she get out of this? If you've got someone who is a fraud, they want something, usually money or sometimes fame and fortune and people claiming how great they are. She didn't search for any of that.
That is actually one clue as to her genuineness that we haven't really emphasized. How often does she self-promote? Almost never. How many times does she gather people in a group to hear her speak? And how many times does she try to put her name on great things? She just does the work. That's very interesting, right? We haven't really talked about that. She doesn't try to become famous.
She only sees herself as an instrument.
She's more self-deprecating than anything.
Yes, she is. She calls herself an old lady with a potato nose. And yeah, she makes fun of the fact that her boss sent her away so that the Chelas wouldn't be attracted to her beauty and things like that. So, yeah, she's self-deprecating, like you said. One more thing. Never, ever have I heard her say that she had achieved any particular level of advancement except to call herself a Chela. That's the only thing. She never said, oh, I've reached the fourth initiation. You should listen to me.
Huge clue. To our viewers, please hear that. Look at organizations that you're a part of, teachers that you study with, fellow students, and notice how many of them discuss this, that I've achieved this and that, or I'm at this level, or, oh, he's at that stage of advancement, so I'm going to study with him. Notice that. Notice that. The more advanced ones will never bring this up.
Yeah, they don't. And keep that in mind. So, with all of that, to bring us up to date, let's dive into our topic today. We're going to finish letter number 92. We are in the middle of a discussion of what is her biggest fault, because Sinnett and Hume both thought that she had tremendous faults. And the three enemies that she had created by revealing their shortcomings also thought she was a huge failure. KH disagrees with that and says she has a few difficult aspects to her personality, but I'm going to reveal her one great fault. He still hasn't quite got there yet, but he told us that one of her big faults is that she's overly zealous. She tries too hard. And he says, I pledge to you my word of honor that she never was a deceiver, nor has she ever purposely uttered an untruth, though her position becomes often difficult, and she has to conceal a number of things as pledged to by her solemn vows. And now I have done with this question. Let's pick up there with our material for today's session.
My good friend, I am now going to once more approach a subject I know is very repulsive to your mind, for you have talked about it repeatedly. And yet, in order to make some things clear to you, I am compelled to address it. You have often asked the question, why do the brothers refuse to turn their attention to such worthy, sincere theosophists as C.C. Massey and Henry J. Hood, or such a precious subject as Stainton Moses?
Henry J. Hood was another prominent theosophist in London that they had been watching. They had been watching all of them since Sinnett's visit to London the previous year and trying to see who might be a good candidate to help in the work. So they've kept all of these people in mind, and he was one of them.
Well, I now answer you very clearly that we have done so ever since that gentleman came into contact with HPB. They were all tested in various ways, and not one of them came up to the desired mark. Wow. Morya gave special attention to CCM for reasons I will now explain, and with the same results as those at present known to you. You may say that such a secret way of testing people is dishonest, that we ought to have warned him. Well, all I can say is that it may be so from your European standpoint, but that, being Asiatics, we cannot depart from our rules.
Remember that Hume especially really railed against this idea of being tested. How dare you? How dare you say that we have to submit to your rules and be tested to see what our quality is? That is unthinkable.
A man's character, his true inner nature, can never be thoroughly drawn out if he believes he is being watched. Ooh.
If someone knows that you're watching them, of course they're going to be careful, but you can tell a person's real nature when they don't know that they're being watched.
But a good clue for us on our path, if you're on the spiritual path, the universe always knows. So act as though you are always being observed, because you really are. The universe doesn't forget.
Remember, the Akashic recorder is recording every single second. You can't avoid the master's eyes, so to speak.
Right. We don't know for certain, but that's kind of how karma works. The Akashic records probably play a part in how karma is recorded and then, like a boomerang, somehow gets resent back to you. Every thought you think, everything you do is recorded, and that's how it works. Not for punishment, it's physics, basically.
Yes, remember, karma is nothing more than as you sow, so shall you reap. And whatever you put out into the world, generally or directed to a particular group or person, the same quality, the same amount will return to you.
Besides, Colonel Olcott had never made a secret of that way of ours, and all the British Theosophists ought to know that their entire group was being tested, since we had sanctioned it under a regular probation. As for CCM, of all the Theosophists, he was the one selected by Morya, and with a definite purpose, owing to HPB's pleadings.
HPB, this is another one of her shortcomings. She loved people so much that she overestimated their qualities. And she did this time after time. She would meet somebody, barely know them, and she would be extolling what a great person this is. And we're going to find out she was often extremely wrong.
Oh, wow. Quote, "He will turn on you someday, my daughter," Morya repeatedly told her, in answer to her pleas to accept him as a regular Chela along with Olcott. So she was wrong in this case. Mm-hmm. "He will never, never do that," she exclaimed in reply. "CCM is the best, most noble, etc., 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 adding a string of laudatory and admiring adjectives. 2 years later, she said the same of Ross Scott. We've heard that name before.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We'll talk about him.
Okay. "Two such staunch, devoted friends I have never had," she assured her boss, who only laughed in his beard and asked me to arrange the theosophical marriage.
Oh, theosophical marriage. Where and when did this theosophical marriage take place? Ross Scott was the Irish theosophists who joined them in 1879 when they stopped over for 2 weeks in London on their way to India. And he was a young British subject that she was immediately attracted to as someone who could be a rising star in this new theosophical society. He traveled to India with them and then went his way, and he became the secretary for the Shimla Eclectic Society. He had a bad leg, so obviously HPB could feel for him because of his problem with his leg, and it was fairly bad, apparently. So she begged the masters, "Can you please help him and heal that leg for him?" So Morya said, "Okay, I'll tell you what," because as you can see, she just was completely enthralled with him. Morya said, "We will put him on probation for 6 months. If he passes the 6-month probation period, we'll heal his leg for him. And we're also going to help him find a wife who will help him in life." So guess who they arranged for a wife for him? Hume's only daughter, Minnie. And she is their only child. So Hume, who is quite wealthy and has only one daughter, only one child, is perfectly happy to marry her off to Ross Scott, this young Irish up-and-coming theosophist who might just be the next Chela. Let's see what happens.
Well, one was tested and tried for 3 years, the other for 3 months. With what results, I hardly need remind you. Not only were no temptations ever put in front of either one, but the latter was furnished with a wife amply sufficient for his happiness and connections that will prove beneficial to him someday.
Yeah, imagine being married to the only daughter of a very famous man in British India, and quite well-to-do to boot.
CCM had but one objective, undeniable phenomena to stand on. Ross Scott had, moreover, a visit in astral form from Morya. In the case of one, the revenge of 3 unprincipled men, and in the case of the other, the jealousy of a petty-minded fool made short work of the boasted friendship, and showed the old lady what the friendship was worth. Oh, the poor, trusting, credulous nature. Take away her clairvoyant powers, plug up in a certain direction her intuitions, as Morya was required to do, and what remains? A helpless, heartbroken woman.
Whoa.
Wow.
Okay, now sounds like everything's crashing down here. So in the case of one, C.C. Massey, he now is beset by these unscrupulous enemies of HPB and Theosophy who are trying to turn him, CCM, against her and Theosophy because they themselves got harmed and their dishonesty was revealed to the public. So they're going to get some payback here. So that's what caused CCM to fail as a potential Chela. And what did he say? He said, we didn't give them any trials whatsoever. We simply watched. Nothing set in front of them to see how they would deal with it. Just stand back and watch. They both failed. And in the case of the other, who was this petty-minded fool? It was Roscott's wife, the daughter of Hume. When she saw how much attention he was getting from HPB and the Mahatmas in Theosophy, she got very jealous. And she set about to turn him against Theosophy and succeeded. So not only did he not become a Chela, his leg didn't get fixed either. But Morya knew what was going to happen. He laughed, remember, when HPB said, no, they will never, ever, ever turn against you. And what happened? They both turned against him. They both turned against Theosophy.
Take another case, that of Fern. His development, since you have witnessed it, gives you a useful study and a hint as to even more serious methods adopted in individual cases to thoroughly test the latent moral qualities of the man. Every human being contains within himself vast potentials, and it is the duty of the adepts to surround the would-be Chela with circumstances which will enable him to take the right-hand path if he has the ability in him. We are no more at liberty to withhold the chance from a postulant than we are to guide and direct him into the proper course. At best, we can only show him, after his probation period is successfully terminated, that if he does one thing, he will go right. If the other, he will go wrong. But until he has passed that probation period, we leave him to fight his battles as best he can. And I have to do so occasionally with higher and initiated Chelas such as HPB, once they are allowed to work in the world that all of us more or less avoid. More than that, if my previous letters about Fern haven't opened your eyes enough, we allow our candidates to be tempted in 1,000 different ways so as to draw out all of their inner nature and allow it the chance of ending up a conqueror, either one way or the other.
A conqueror, he's going to explain what he means by one way or the other.
What has happened to Fern has befallen everyone else who has preceded him, and will befall with various results everyone who succeeds him. We are all tested like that, and while a Murad Ali Beg failed, I succeeded.
Yes, we'll put on the screen the episode where we talked about Mirza Murad Ali Beg and the disastrous results of him trying to redeem himself from practicing black magic.
The victor's crown is only for him who proves himself worthy to wear it, for him who confronts Mara by himself and conquers the demon of lust and earthly passions. And it isn't we, but he himself who places the crown on his head. Oh my gosh.
So
Oh gosh.
It isn't like in the coronation of the King of England where the head of the church places this magnificent crown on his head. In the hierarchy, it is the aspirant who, by having passed all of the trials, puts it on himself. He crowns himself.
I love that.
Yeah.
We haven't mentioned Mara too much, but this is a capital M. This is from the Hindu mythology, right?
No.
It's not from Hindu?
No. You don't know the story of Mara.
Well, I know what she represents, but I thought she was from the Hindu mythology, like Durga.
This is from the teaching of Buddha. Mara is part of the story of Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, who, a royal individual in India.
She was the one who tempted him under the Bodhi tree when he was in his meditation.
I don't know if that's where it took place. You might be right. But she was the temptress, and this was his trial. He was beset with these demons, as they were called in those days, all of these astral entities who tried one way and another to tempt him. And he passed the test. Let's see what we can find in the voice of the silence regarding that. In the voice of the silence, she says, "Beware, Lanu," which is Chela. "Beware, Lanu, lest dazzled by elusive radiance, thy soul should linger and be caught in its deceptive light. This light shines from the jewel of the great ensnarer, Mara. The senses it bewitches, blinds the mind, and leaves the unwary an abandoned wreck. The moth attracted to the dazzling flame of thy night lamp is doomed to perish in the viscid oil. The unwary soul that fails to grapple with the mocking demon of illusion will return to earth the slave of Mara." We all have to pass through that. And for many of us, it's our entire lifetime. We're living in it. Mara is the illusion with which we are surrounded at every moment of the day. Until the aspirant recognizes that this is all phony, so to speak, it's all illusion, none of it is real. The fact that you have 700 billion euros in your bank account is completely useless. It has no value whatsoever in the spiritual realms. It will get you nowhere. It's actually a weight around your neck.
Unless you did something like helping the world to receive it, but that's highly unlikely.
Highly unlikely. More than likely, that is going to be your ticket to the left-hand path. Those people are very definitely headed in the wrong direction.
The 700 billion euros is one of Mara's ways of temptation, because that can buy all kinds of physical temporary pleasures that you would want more of and more of and more of.
So it's self-defeating.
Right.
The more you get, the more you want, the more you have to show your superiority over every other person.
It's not that different than giving you enough rope to hang yourself with, spiritually speaking.
Yeah.
Here's a bunch of money. Here's unlimited funds. It's a rope. It's a noose.
And what do the Mahatmas do?
They watch.
They laugh in their beards. Those silly mortals. When will they learn? When will they ever
And that's
learn?
not cold-hearted. They also send good energy that we can receive if we're open to it. But if you have 700 billion euros, you're probably not open to that, to receiving that energy.
Probably not. Your intuition, let's say, is probably not real well developed.
If you're interested in seeing a very simple visualization of the process of Siddhartha interacting with Mara, it's a famous story about how he became enlightened and how he overcame this demon of desire. And you can just type it in, Buddha and Mara, in Google and YouTube, and there'll be plenty of short descriptions and there are animations of it. And then once he overcomes it, he emerges out of his 40-plus day meditation, and he is now the Buddha. He has overcome the temptations, and he's enlightened. Cool.
Mm-hmm. It is.
It was not a meaningless phrase of the Tathagata,
which is Buddha,
that, quote, "He who masters self with a capital S is greater than he who conquers thousands in battle." That's heavy.
Every great teacher has said this one way or the other. When you conquer your illusory self, that's when you have won more than anybody in the outer world. Mm-hmm. Anyone else. You're way beyond them.
Genghis Khan conquered thousands in battle, But did he conquer himself? Probably not.
I kind of doubt it.
He wouldn't have killed thousands of people if he conquered himself.
Millions, probably.
If you conquer other business owners and create a monopoly and you're the biggest business owner in the world, you conquered thousands, so to speak. But did you conquer yourself? Probably not. Apply it to current day. This is interesting. This is very telling. There is no other struggle that is so difficult. And that's true. If it were not so, adeptship would be but a cheap acquirement. That's why Raja Yoga doesn't seem attractive to a lot of people. They would rather do Hatha Yoga and achieve handstand and fancy acrobatics, because that's conquering. You're better than the other people, right? But did you conquer your mind?
No, but they did read The Secret.
Oh, right. They manifested it, which that has some degree of usefulness. I mean, being able to manifest does, but just steer towards the right-hand path as opposed to the left. So, my good brother, be not surprised and blame us not so readily as you have already done at any part of our policy towards aspirants, past, present, or future. Only those who can look ahead at the far remote consequences of things are in a position to judge as to the expediency of our own actions, or those we permit in others. It's interesting how he says permit in others. They don't really permit. That must be some type of semantics.
Well, they permit people to make mistakes.
Well, I guess they could prevent them. They could, right? But they would never do that. Interesting that it's almost like they're controlling people, but they're not. What may seem present bad faith may, in the end, prove the truest, most benevolent loyalty. Is that so?
Well, yeah, they don't know, and the aspirant doesn't know what they're capable of. So both have to watch to see what they do under stress. Mm-hmm. You can't know how strong something is unless you stress it. And then the ones that you didn't think were going to break. And sometimes the ones that you were certain were going to fail come through the test.
Let me show you who was right and who was faithless. One who is true and approved today may tomorrow prove, under a new set of circumstances, a traitor, an ingrate, a coward, an imbecile. The reed, bent beyond its limit of flexibility, will have snapped in twain. Shall we accuse the reed? No, because we pity it. We cannot select it as one of the reeds that have been tried and found strong, hence fit to be accepted as material for the indestructible temple we are so carefully building. Very eloquent.
And this brings up something else. The Mahatmas, like HPB, love dearly every single person in the world. They test every single person who raises their hand and says, I want to be tested. They're required to do that. And they also look at other people who haven't raised their hands just to see what might happen if they give them a certain opportunity, or just observing them and maybe putting a very slight obstacle in front of them. Just observe.
Right. Because a lot of people that are would-be chelas don't even know about the masters. They don't even know there is a path. And yet they're on the edge of being worthy or being ready or prepared. There are many yogis who are not yogis. I know many of them.
I'm convinced that the majority of chelas who are being observed and brought along behind the scenes don't know it, a lot of them, and many of them know nothing about the Theosophical Society or Theosophy at all, even the name of it. So, yeah, they are thousands and thousands in the world that are unaware of this attention that they're getting.
To me, this is one of the most obvious things about this, about good people in the world. If you know someone, or if you are yourself, someone who is non-reactive, who says, is that so, and doesn't get up in arms, and who helps people, and who just has like an unshakable integrity about them, those are some of the qualities of exactly who they're looking for. You don't have to go do fancy asanas in the heat and teach the Yoga Sutras.
No, they're looking for people who don't have big egos, people who are introspective as far as trying to figure things out around them, who are contemplative, people who are kind and try to help others, who love everyone in the world and try to help wherever they can. And these people make mistakes by helping people they shouldn't try to help. But that's a minor thing. That can be corrected. The people who don't try to help anybody are the ones who have almost no chance of making any progress.
And now to other matters. We have a reform in mind. Ooh, exciting. And I look to you to help me. Mr. Hume's annoying and indiscreet interference with the parent society and his passion for dominating everything have made us come to the conclusion that it would be worth our time to attempt the following.
So now they're going to kind of make a declaration, or through Sinnett, make this declaration.
Let it be made known to all concerned.
To all concerned.
Through the Theosophist, the magazine, and circulars issued to every branch, that hitherto the members have looked too often to the parent body for guidance and as an example to follow. This is quite impractical. Besides, the fact that the founders have to be everything to everyone in all things, since there is such a great variety of creeds, opinions, and expectations to satisfy. They cannot possibly satisfy all as they would like to. They try to be impartial and never to refuse one what they may have accorded to another party. Thus, they have repeatedly published criticisms upon Vedantism, Buddhism, and Hinduism in its various branches, upon the Veda Bhashya of Swami Dayananda, their staunchest and at that time most valued ally. But because such criticisms were all directed against non-Christian faiths, no one ever paid the slightest attention to it.
We've got a situation here. The Theosophists, like every magazine and newspaper at the time, made money not from their subscriptions, but from advertising. And they accepted all kinds of different advertisements, unless it was something that was certainly disagreeable and that they wouldn't want their paper to be associated with.
Isn't this what Facebook does?
Yes. Still the same today. Nothing has ever changed. What does the Old Testament say? There is nothing new under the sun. So some of these groups would publish anti-information concerning other groups. And the Theosophists allowed all of it. There were anti-Christian statements, and who was one of the biggest publishers of anti-Christian statements at the time? Annie Besant.
At this time?
At this time, absolutely. She was well known in England as a reformer. Once she figured out that Christianity wasn't what she thought it was, she left the church. And of course, her husband, who was a vicar in the Anglican church, divorced her. No, she paid dearly for that.
Wow.
But she had a time when she was a free thinker and wrote and published anti-Christian pamphlets. And I don't know, but some of them may have ended up in the Theosophist.
Wow.
Now, keep in mind, too, that behind the scenes, not even behind the scenes, in front of everybody, Hume has all of a sudden become the savior of Christianity. He, who never even pretended to practice Christianity before, all of a sudden has decided he's the great defender of the faith. So he has taken the part against the Mahatmas, against Theosophy, against HPB, of defending Christianity. So that's what's going on here. But it's not just Christianity, it's Buddhism, it's all of these different philosophies competing in India for adherence. So they're all publishing their information in the Theosophist, and Hume is complaining about it. That's what's going on here. Some of the others have complained previously, but Hume, being the loudmouth that he is, has taken the bullhorn and used the Theosophist to complain about it.
So Hume officially is now coming out against the masters? Like blatantly, kind of, at this point?
in his own way, in
Okay.
a kind of offhanded
Okay.
way. He always takes, well, I'm just trying to help things.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to even the field here and make people look at things that maybe they're ignoring.
Even though he's still involved heavily, he is removed from leadership,
He removed himself from being the president of the Eclectic Society.
but he's still very much involved at this
Oh,
point.
yes.
Even though it's very...
He loves that. He loves the power play.
For more than a year, the journal came out regularly with an advertisement at odds with the tenets of the Veda Bhashya and was printed side by side with it to satisfy the Benares Vedantins. And Benares is a city in India.
Well, yes, it's now called Varanasi.
Oh.
Mhm.
Oh, wow. And so it's one of the sacred... Almost every city is sacred in India.
It is the most sacred city in India, I
Yes.
believe.
And a Vedantin is somebody who practices the school of Vedanta spirituality. And now Mr. Hume comes out with his public rebuke of the founders. That's terrible. That's horrendous. And seeks to prohibit the advertisement of anti-Christian pamphlets.
Yeah, he's going to be the hero for the Christians now.
I want you, therefore, to please bear this in mind and point out these facts to Colonel Chesney, who seems to imagine that Theosophy is hostile only to Christianity, whereas it is simply impartial. And whatever the personal views of the two founders, the Journal of the Society has nothing to do with them, and will just as willingly publish criticism directed against Lamaism as against Christianity. At all events, willing as Morya and I both are that HPB should always gratefully accept your advice in the matter, it was I who advised her to oppose Mr. Hume's attempts at authority, and you are at liberty to inform him of the fact.
And Lamaism is another word for Tibetan Buddhism because they have lamas. Those are their teachers.
Mm-hmm. Now, in an attempt to mend matters, what do you think of the idea of putting the branches on a very different footing? Even Christendom, with its divine pretensions to a universal brotherhood, has its 1,001 sects, which, united as they may be under one banner of the cross, are yet essentially at odds with each other. That's a very good point, huh? Yeah, why are there so many sects?
Yeah,
in
exactly.
Christianity?
And why don't they combine like the Mahatmas do and say, you know what, let's do something good for humanity? And the answer is because that's not their goal. Their goal is, what can I do for us, for me?
But in layman's terms, the public explanation of why there are so many sects, what, they have different beliefs? I mean, the beliefs aren't that different, right?
Right, but can they work together? No, because they are not really spiritual in nature. They've got ulterior motives, and it's not spiritual development.
Somebody wants to be the leader of something, and so they create a sect. Well, I'm going to be the leader of this sect and call it Jehovah's Witness or Southern Baptist or...
No, in the past, the easiest way to make money was to form a new religion.
Create a church, yeah. You get tax exemption and you get people donating and...
Yeah, it's like you're making other people support financially your operation because you don't have to pay taxes on stuff.
When you promise people comfort from fire and brimstone, there's big money in that.
Yes, there is.
I don't want to burn forever with the devil and screams and agonizing pain forever. I'll pay you. Save me from that. Here's 10% of my income.
I think it's called protection money or fire insurance, maybe.
That's funny. That's hilarious. Fire insurance. Oh my gosh. The authority of the Pope is disregarded by the Protestants. Really? I didn't know that.
Yes, they don't have any respect for the Pope. That was the whole point of Protestantism, was a revolt against the dominion of the Pope in Rome.
I know the Pope is Catholic specifically, but do other Christian sects acknowledge the Pope, or is it just Catholicism?
Only Catholicism,
Pretty
even
set.
not all of Catholicism, because the Eastern Orthodox don't revere the Pope. They see him as a holy leader, I guess, an equal, but they don't see him as superior.
I did not even know that. That's very telling right there. Okay,
You
weird.
need to go back to Sunday school.
I guess I should. Let's go.
Let's go. Yeah. I think we would both get kicked out.
We would. Or we could just sit in the back and be flies on the wall and just observe.
No, we can't do that.
No. We would giggle too much. No, I'm just joking. We would
We would do that. We would do that, but we would also make some comments that would definitely get us kicked out.
ask some provocative questions. The authority of the Pope is disregarded by the Protestants, while the decrees of the Protestant synods are laughed at by the Roman Catholics. I wouldn't want such a state of affairs among the theosophical bodies. What I want is simply a paper on the advisability of remodeling the present setup of branches and their privileges. Let them all be chartered as they are now by the parent society, depend on it nominally, but choose one object to work for, an object, of course, in sympathy with the general principles of the TS, yet a distinct and definite object of its own, whether along religious, educational, or philosophical lines. This would allow the society a broader range for its general operations. More real, useful work would be done, and, since every branch would be somewhat independent in its operations, there would be less room for complaint and interference. Dude, this is amazing that he's proposing. He has some business knowledge, obviously, structural, organizational wherewithal.
He's taken Sinnett into his confidence ever since he got back from London a year and a half earlier, and has realized that he is their best hope for someone other than HPB and Alcott to further the work. So he is really investing a lot of time and effort in bringing him up to speed and hoping that he will catch the vision.
I love that. Yeah, this is an example of what we've talked about before, how the plan can and usually does need to be changed, how an architect or an engineer or a contractor will, of course, have some blueprints at first. But obviously, as you're building, things change, and you need to be able and willing to shift. This is what is being proposed, a shift, and we're still going towards a goal, but they're proposing a change, which is amazing. It's beautiful.
Yes.
I like that.
And this isn't something that has ever been done before in this manner on this globe. So it's completely new, and they're kind of floundering. The founders are floundering, trying to figure out, how do we do this? Do we try this? And they did. They tried one thing after another, kind of made changes as they went, and the results were what they happened to be. But yeah, there are lots and lots of mistakes along the way.
But they're learning. The flounders are foundering.
Yeah. Okay, that's fish falling to the bottom of the sea, I think.
I hope this hazy sketch will germinate and thrive in your business-like head. And if you could write a paper for the December or maybe even the November issue of the Theosophist, Morya and I would be very much obliged. It is impossible to entrust such a subject, which requires the most delicate handling, with either of our editors.
Now this is funny.
HPB wouldn't fail to break the Padres' heads on such a good opportunity, and Alcott, HSO, would turn it into a compliment or two for the founders' benefit, which would be useless since I'm trying to show the two entities, editors and founders, to be quite separate from each other, even though they are the same persons. I'm not a practical businessman, and therefore I feel utterly unfit for the task. Will you help me, friend?
Oh. Yeah, he's really fond of Sinnett. But it's kind of funny that they're taking Sinnett into their confidence time and time again, and he's revealing some of the things that they don't admire about HPB or Alcott, and yet they leave them alone. Let them flounder. Let the founders flounder. And they do that time and time again.
This Sinnett, man, he's interesting. He had done so much
He
more.
could have done a lot. At the end of our series here, we're going to do some deep dive into several different things. For one thing, we're going to cover everything that we have learned about what does Chela-ship entail. How does one succeed in becoming an accepted Chela and moving forward? And what caused so many people to fail? We're going to look at many of the lives of the people that we have encountered so far and will still encounter in these letters. See what happened in their own lives and see what we can learn from that. We're going to talk more about Raja Yoga and how does that come into this. So we're setting the groundwork here, we hope, for a masterclass, a masterclass in how to become a Chela. Yeah, that's basically what we hope to achieve here.
It would be better, of course, if the feeler were to appear in the November issue as if in answer to Mr. Hume's very impolite letter, which, of course, I will not permit to be published.
So this is kind of funny. He says he wrote this very rude letter, which I'm not even going to allow HPB to publish, but we're going to put forth some new information, and Hume will immediately recognize that we are responding to it.
But you could take it for your groundwork and the basis for your editorial answer. Regarding the reform of branches, this question will have to be seriously considered and weighed before it is finally settled. There must be no more disappointment in members once they have joined. Each branch has to choose its well-defined goal to work for, and the greatest care should be taken in the selection of presidents. If the eclectic had been set up on such a footing of distinct independence from the beginning, it might have fared better.
Remember, the eclectic was another example of a test case. They allowed a different type of operation, and so far it has failed miserably.
There must always be solidarity of thought and action within the broad outline of the general principles of the society between the parent and branch bodies. Yet the branches must each be allowed their own independent action in everything that does not clash with those principles. Thus, a branch composed of mild Christians sympathizing with the objects of the society might remain neutral in the question of every other religion, and utterly indifferent to and unconcerned with the private beliefs of the founders. The Theosophists making room as willingly for hymns on the lamb as for shlokas on the sacredness of the cow.
Now he's being funny.
Yeah, so he's talking about Christianity regarding hymns on the lamb and shlokas, which are verses or sutras really from Hinduism, where the cow is sacred.
Right.
That's interesting.
So another example of his humor.
Mm-hmm. If you could work out this idea, I would submit it to our venerable Chauhan, who, ever since he saw you become president, now gently smiles from the corner of his eye instead of frowning as before. That's hilarious. So we don't know who this Chauhan is, but it's one of their chiefs.
It's their supervisor.
Mm-hmm. Smiling from the corner of his eye, meaning like barely. He doesn't show much emotion, apparently.
No, he doesn't. And the English people don't like him at all. They don't know much about him, but what they do know about him, they don't like because he's way too stern, way too severe.
We assume that he has a physical body. We assume that he's up there somewhere.
Yeah. KH went to visit him in the very early phase of the correspondence.
I was going to make this proposal to the ex-president if his belligerence hadn't sent me to bed earlier than normal. That's funny. I've never heard that term before.
What do you think he's referring to here?
Hume.
Did he use the term sent to bed?
Well, he maybe just gave up. Like he got pissed and left. He got frustrated.
No, I think he's referring to a parent who, at the dinner table, one of the children does something wrong, and so they get sent to bed early.
I see.
So, in other words, he's saying, this is how Hume treats me, as if he's the parent and telling me what to do. I am the naughty one, and he's going to assert his authority over me. Yeah, and that's exactly what Hume is doing.
He condemns altogether the system and policy of our order. It seems to him quite wrong. I must enter my indignant and emphatic protest against his version of our faulty system, in quotes, of course. Because he caught a few stray glimpses of the principles of our order, he felt he should be allowed to take apart and remodel the whole system and turn us into what he wanted us to be.
Yeah. So Hume, the great, powerful Wizard of Oz, has this organization, and they have some powers that he's itching to get his hands on. If they will just turn over the levers of this operation to him, he will get it set to where it will take over the whole world, and he will be the leader of the world and will save the entire world. He's got grandiose ideas.
If we could just adopt such doctrines as he would impose upon us and submit for a single hour to stand by silently under the load of such claims as he has dumped on us in his September letter, then we really would deserve to lose all credit with the Theosophists. We ought to be dismissed and hounded out of the society as charlatans and impostors who come to steal away men's hearts with mystic promises, while actually holding the most despotic intentions, seeking to enslave our devoted chelas and turn the masses away from the truth and the, quote, divine revelation of nature's voice to empty, dreary atheism, a complete disbelief in the, quote, kind, merciful Father and Creator of all, including evil and misery, I suppose, who lounges in the eternities, lying with his backbone against a bed of incandescent meteors and picking his teeth with a lightning fork. That's pretty funny.
So, yeah, now he's riffing on the anthropomorphic idea of the Christian God.
That sounds like Zeus or something, lying with his backbone against a bed of incandescent meteors and picking his teeth with a lightning fork. Oh my gosh. Indeed, we have had enough of this incessant harping on Christian revelation.
Yeah, so again, Hume has grandiose ideas, and guess who is going to be the focus of it? Not the Mahatmas, Mr. Hume.
Morya thinks that the supplement ought to be enlarged if necessary. Now, the supplement is part of the Theosophist.
Right. They have a set number of pages, and I forget how many it is every month. But quite often, if they've got more material than what will fit in that, they will issue a supplement. Mm-hmm. Because the printer sets up everything on a regular basis for a certain number of pages. Everything is the same every single month. And then when they deviate from that, it would throw everything off. So they just issue it as a separate pamphlet to go along with it when it's mailed out.
How is it distributed? Mailed to who?
Mailed to all of the subscribers. There is a subscription fee, but that doesn't cover all of the expenses.
Is it put out like at stores and stuff? People can pick it up?
I don't know if it was ever put in any venues like that, but for the most part, they were mailed.
Like at 7-Eleven? The Circle K or something?
Yeah, exactly. It would be Habib's.
Yeah. Habib's Corner Store?
Yeah, there you go.
However diametrically opposed these may be, the Theosophist ought to assume a distinct tone and become a unique specimen of its own. We are ready to furnish the necessary extra funds for it.
Now, this is interesting.
Wow.
What did he say?
We're ready to furnish?
We've got money, and if you need money, we'll pay for it ourselves. The Mahatmas have money. They're not poor.
Wow.
They also aren't billionaires, I don't think. They might be, though. They might be. Well, here, I'll give you a little glimpse. The Mahatmas do have money. Some of them have property that they obviously have other people work or they lease out to other people. So some of them are landowners, apparently, from what I've deduced. But there's something else that HPB mentioned at one point, just kind of as a throwaway, and that is that they sometimes have access to buried treasures. And sometimes they have to wait very long periods of time before they can actually access them. For what reason? Because there are elementals guarding them.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
So they have a curse on them.
Oh wow.
And they don't want to waste any energy trying to overcome that curse. But once that energy diminishes to a certain point, then they can access it with little expenditure of their own energy, and they do have access to some of these buried, hidden treasures.
And they were probably hidden by other members of the hierarchy in ages past for this
Or
purpose.
they were hidden by nefarious beings, pirates even. They know that they're about to be caught, so they bury it on an island somewhere, and then their ship gets bombed with cannons by the British Navy or another evil entity, and then they go down and the treasure is buried somewhere and no one knows where. But the Mahatmas know. Now, let's finish this.
I know you will grasp my idea, however vaguely expressed. I leave our plan entirely in your hands. Success in this will counteract the effects of the cyclic crisis. You ask what you can do. Nothing better than what I'm proposing.
There you go. So they are taking Sinnett once again into their confidence and telling him stuff that they wouldn't normally reveal to anybody except maybe HPB or Eckhart. We get so many good behind-the-scenes scenarios here that are really intriguing. There's one little section we're going to get to next time, and then we will be done with this long letter. But again, we learned so much. And I don't know about you, but I wake up every day and think how lucky I am to have been able to delve into this to this extent and grasp some information that eluded me for many years.
Eluded many people.
All right. Enough for today?
See you next time.
Yes, we will. And thanks for coming along on our journey.